thermal recovery wheels, heat recovery wheels, enthalpy wheels, whatever you call them. And again, these for us are critically important. One, because most of them aren't recovering very much heat right now. I will show you why. But secondly, if we get these running properly, this is the best opportunity we have of reducing that peak gas demand going forward. At your hospital, that means your future low carbon plant will be smaller, will cost less. Like, this is a win-win. And on a societal basis, now we don't have to keep adding to the gas distribution, the gas network, because we don't want to be spending money on pipes. We want to spend that money on making things more efficient. So a number of you were involved in the research project we conducted last year. This was the phase 1 of the research to figure out the lay of the land and who's doing what. There are 10 hospitals that took part. You can see them listed there, and there are a whole bunch of issues found with thermal wheels. The number one, which we'll get to, is the preheat set point. And the reason I got my panelists there, preheat set too high, we'll show you why that matters in a moment. But you're measuring the heat in and the heat out of the thermal wheel underperforming, that the way the programming is set up can affect. So these are all of the issues found that were preventing not just the maximum performance out of these heat recovery wheels, but in some cases, almost any performance at all. In some cases, they're just going round and round and round and not doing anything, not because there's something wrong with the technology, but because of the way they're set up and operated. So there's a whole bunch of, just for interest, how many hospitals have heat recovery, at least one heat recovery wheel in the hospital? Can you raise your hands? Yeah, there's lots of them. It's a normal technology in a cold climate. And we're saying, for us, this is one of the top 5 measures that we can do to have a profound effect everywhere that costs almost nothing. But here's the big idea. This is a graphic of a building automation system. You've got the exhaust airflow at the top with the fan on the left-hand side of the wheel. And you've got the outside air coming in at the bottom with a fan, again, downstream of the heat wheel, which is how we prefer it. You can run it either way. But the key is, in the bottom left-hand corner there, you see the preheat coil. So the preheat coil is there because on really cold weather, when that heat wheel just goes round and round and round, and it gets warmed up by the exhaust air, and it carries that heat, and in the case of an enthalpy wheel, the humidity down to the supply air. Conceptually very simple, very efficient. And again, the way that we got a couple of people involved with Humber River, the way it was done at Humber River can be even more efficient where they oversized the unit. So essentially we were amazed by how much heat was being transferred between the two, being extracted from the exhaust air and put into the supply air. That preheat coil is there because if it's running too efficiently, you can get frost. You can get ice on the cold end of that thing. So then you want to kind of slow it down or heat the air up. But everybody wants to play it safe, and they run the preheat temperature too high. So essentially, for this to be its most efficient, you want really cold air coming in at the bottom, which will extract more heat at the top. Does that kind of make sense? So very important technology, very important piece of equipment. When that preheat coil is set too high, it completely emasculates it. So it takes out the potential to recover heat. So that's what's wrong. I'm not sure this is the best visualization, but the intent here is the red line is how much heat's recovered going from minus 15 degrees Celsius set point. So if you set that wheel, the preheat coil to, it's not going to run until we're really, really cold, minus 15, which we see more in Alberta than we see here, all the way up to plus 5. And we see a lot of these wheels set at plus 5. So the red line is the amount of heat that's recovered. And what that's saying is that we're at minus 15, we get 100% of the heat out. So that's as efficient as the wheel can do. It's working as hard as it can. When we're at plus 5 degrees, and we see a lot of wheels set there, it's almost all gone. We're down to 93%, and it's probably not even justifying the electricity that's going in to turn the wheel round and round. So you take out 93% of the efficiency of the investment you've made in that heat recovery equipment by setting the preheat too high. There's a whole bunch of other things have to be dealt with locally, and you'll recognize some of these. Snow buildup, being able to control supply. All of this is in the research report that's up on Greening Healthcare website. So you'll have site-specific issues. There's the issue of air imbalance, and none of the hospitals taking part had tested the airflows, the supply and the exhaust airflow. They didn't have test reports. And if you have a big imbalance between the two, it affects the performance of the wheel. So one of the things we say you should all do is get an air testing contractor in and verify the fact you have the right airflows. Low speed operation, being able to gear the wheel down so that you can run it. Anyway, all of those other issues, it comes back to the biggest issue is that preheat coil set point temperature. You can see the magnitude of the savings. So Southlake is one of these hospitals, and for interest, we talked about saving 125,000 cubic meters a year by improving the boiler efficiency. We can save 500,000 cubic meters a year by resetting the controls. And